to me that the issues basically all cut for Trump right now. The economy cuts for Trump, foreign policy cuts for Trump, immigration cuts for Trump, some of the social issues cut for Trump. Probably the one issue that the Democrats are getting...
Before you get into that, because I think that's an interesting point to make, I did want to flag one point you made there, that access to the ballot is the only explanation for why there were so many more people voting in 2020 than 2016. I would just point out, so I was down in D.C. on January 21st, 2017, covering the Women's March. I have never seen a march that big in my life in Washington, D.C. Something like 5 million people, most of them women, came out and marched that day against Donald Trump. This is the day after he was inaugurated. Democrats themselves, the Democratic leadership, was hostile to or skeptical of that Women's March. They were flat on their back. This was an organic kind of Facebook generated reaction to the election of Donald Trump. And it was real. Like the anger and the shock that Trump had become president was a real thing. And you saw that energy for 4 straight years. And you saw it metastasize in some really interesting ways that we can talk about. And I think that played a significant role in why so many people voted in 2020. Like they were just livid at Trump.
I'm not so sure. I'm not denying the left is good at street organizing. They do it a lot. But I don't think the Women's March was unique. You saw similar street protests with the George Floyd riots. Even before that, you saw it with Occupy Wall Street. Even before that, you saw it with the anti-Bush war protests.
Occupy Wall Street, I covered that too. There were dozens of people at Occupy Wall Street, hundreds at the most. But there were Occupy protests throughout the country, too. There was even in New Haven. I was in college at the time, and it Occupy New Haven, which I agree was pretty pitiful. But even going back to the Bush era, you had Code Pink, you had all of these kind of protests. So the left does that. The left takes to the streets throughout the 1970s. That doesn't always translate to votes. It was like substantially different. The numbers of people, that 5 million people is the most in American history, came out against Trump. I'm just saying, it's just worth understanding that as... Like know your enemy, know your adversary. Like they were pissed, and it was real.
Yeah, maybe. The left gets very angry, and they do it in different numbers at different times. My only contention is I don't know that street protests always translate to success at the ballot box. If that were the case, I think probably Kerry would have won in 2004, and I think probably Hillary would have won in 2016. So what changed here was not that the Democrats were especially angry, or that a certain segment, women were especially angry. I think what changed, and what accounts for 10 million new votes, is that they changed the election rules. And so you describe that as access to the ballot. I suppose certain people who otherwise would not be motivated to vote, who weren't paying attention to the election, might have cast a ballot because of ballot harvesting. But it also does.
I don't want to get bogged down, and I'm just saying you can't compare the Women's March and the amount of energy that pulsed into the streets in 2017 to the Iraq War. I was actually participated in that. That was before I was a journalist. There were a couple 100,000 at the peak that came out for that. Code Pink is like 6 people in a group house in D.C. Like these are not
there was more of the Iraq War
remotely comparable movements. And you don't have to absorb any of this that I'm saying, but your analysis is going to continue to be confused if you really believe that Code Pink during the Iraq War is the same as 5 million women coming out of the streets in 2017,
I think
and the effect that had on our politics.
I think the libs come out every 4 years or so, and they yell and they scream.
Okay, but they don't. That's just historically inaccurate. But continue with a historically inaccurate analysis, and you're going to have an improper kind of strategy out of it.
Well, Michael, maybe here's a good question.
I don't know. It kind of looks like we're winning the election right now. So I think the Republican strategy has played pretty well. We'll see. We'll see if the Republicans can overcome the new rule changes that the Democrats crammed down everybody's throats. But as of right now, the polls are looking very, very good for Trump. So if anyone needs to rethink strategy, I think it would probably be the party that ran a guy who obviously had dementia, lied about it, swapped out the candidate at the last minute for a woman who never got a primary vote while she was running for president on issues that she can't win, other than maybe trying to promote infanticide. Even then, probably not going to push her over the finish line.
Well, let's talk about that, because to your point, now Donald Trump has never been, this is a weird figure, but he's actually never been more or less unpopular. If you look at his favorability ratings, they've gone up since like 2020, which is baffling. And if you had told me on January 7th that would happen, the only way I would believe it is if the media continued to react very poorly to like legitimately objectionable things that Donald Trump was doing, but having the exact opposite of what made sense of a reaction from the media, not understanding his voters, not understanding why people continue to like him. That was the only way that it would make sense to me. But the point that I wanted to ask is, as you mentioned, it looks like a lot of the issues that are front of mind for voters are cutting in Republicans' favor, cutting in Trump's favor. But even so, this is basically a statistically tied race, meaning there's a lot of support for Kamala Harris. And I guess maybe to Ryan's point, what do you make of that? Why are so many people, if all of those issues are cutting in Donald Trump's election, the media right now is asking, why isn't Kamala Harris running away with the election? But maybe the question is, why isn't Donald Trump running away with the election if the issues are so in his favor?
Well, I think that there are a lot of historical issues with it, but I think that the chief issue right now is the way that the election is being conducted. So we talk about new voters being brought in. Obviously, the Biden-Harris administration has flooded the country with foreign nationals, many of whom are planning to vote in the election. You don't need to take my word for it. The Heritage Foundation got video interviewing illegal aliens who admitted on camera, I'm an illegal alien. I have been registered to vote, and I intend to vote for Kamala Harris. So this is all available online. You've seen some pushback against that in various states, but it's just a fact that when you have 8 million new border encounters over a 3.5-year period, foreign nationals who overwhelmingly identify with Democrats, that's going to have downstream demographic effects, especially because we know that the children, even the grandchildren of these immigrants, many of whom are illegal immigrants, identify as Democrats, and they will have the right to vote.
But she's at 49% in the RCP average.
Just one final point on this. This is after the largest movement of people in recorded history, which is immigration into the United States since 1965. So I think that's part of the reason is that the Democrats have explicitly campaigned on changing the demographics of the country in a cynical way that actually often harms the people they're bringing in, but will help them electorally. I think that's why this election looks different than if it were taking place, say, 20 years ago.
Walk us through how somebody who is here illegally would vote. Like what?
Well, he would.
And why have we failed to catch anybody other than like one or two people in the past?
No, we've caught more than one or two people, but
maybe six.
Well, yeah, I think it's probably more than six. The way that we
7?
The way that
like it's nothing. It's like minuscule, and then they're all in Texas.
Yeah, no, they're not. They're actually throughout a number of states, including some liberal states like California. But California would be a good place to start because of motor voter laws. So that's the easiest way. When illegal aliens in states with liberal policies go to the DMV, they're allowed to get driver's licenses and other identification forms. And at the DMV, they're allowed to register to vote. Now, of course, officially speaking, they're not supposed to register to vote. But if everyone is automatically being offered the opportunity to register to vote when they're getting their driver's license, then the people who don't have that eligibility, but nonetheless can get a driver's license, sometimes fall into that pile. You're seeing a big issue right now in Arizona because there's a difference between the federal law and the state and the local law. So for state and local elections, people have to show proof of citizenship to register to vote. For the federal level, they don't, which to me is pretty crazy. It seems to me that if anything, it ought to be flipped, and the federal elections are the more important ones. But in any case, that's the rule right now. So now Arizona has to deal with hundreds of thousands of people who are potentially ineligible to vote, and they're probably going to be able to vote anyway, and it will be fought after the election, which is why right now the establishment. Just one final point on this. This is why the establishment media right now are trying to normalize the notion that we won't have the results on election night, which is preposterous. PBS had a headline. They said, not only will we not have the results on election night, but it's normal not to have the results on election night. Every election in my lifetime, including Bush v. Gore, when Democrats tried to overturn the results of that election before it became unpatriotic to try to overturn the results of an election, even in 2000, we had the results on election night. So I'm not sure when it became normal. I guess it's just when the Dems waved their magic wand 4 years ago.
Well, they didn't have the results until December when the Supreme Court
because
decided,
Al Gore challenged the election, but they actually did call the election that night.
But they had needed a recount.
But Kamala Harris is at 49.
They didn't need it. Al Gore pushed for it and then tried to overturn the election.
And there are laws that allow for a recount.
That was back though when Democrats enjoyed overturning the election.
But okay, so in the RCP average, Kamala Harris is at like 49%. So basically, the thing I would disagree with that you're saying is that the amount of, I mean, there's obviously been a huge flood of both legal and